You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Wednesday, May 17th, 2017, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Got a great show for you today. Coming up in our first segment, we will be discussing our Cannabis Minority Report with another great panel from the Not One Step Back that happened at the Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia. Cassandra Frederique from the Drug Policy Alliance moderated a policy on survivors of the drug war that included Kemba Smith. Make sure you stay tuned for that. In our second segment, it's the debut of our Southwest Cannabis Chronicle, and we spoke with Brian Murphy from Patients Without Time in Hawaii on the law there in Hawaii about eviction and the right to grow cannabis if you are a patient. He is facing this eviction, and he wanted to get his story out, so we'll talk about that in the second half hour. Also coming up on the show in the Activist Agenda, we got some amazing video that took place this morning on the 700 Club with Christian broadcaster Pat Robertson slamming Attorney General Sessions on the policy of mandatory minimum sentencing. Then we'll have time for a radical rant at the end of the show. I'm going to talk about OMG, the offensive marijuana gummies. But first, we start things off with cannabis headline news. We got some great news coming out of Connecticut for you right after this 2-minute break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb and licensed by the City of Portland.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the liberal agenda, but with profits. Ka-ching.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for Cultivator's Corner with Jorge Cervantes from marijuanagrowing.com. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net, the complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority Founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at MarijuanaMoment.net.
This is your Cannabis Headline News for Wednesday, May 17, 2017. I'm Russ Belville. Tom Angel at MassRoots.com reports that state lawmakers in Connecticut are considering marijuana legalization as a fix for the state's projected annual budget deficit of more than $2 billion. Legislative leaders in both chambers released a budget proposal on Tuesday that includes legal cannabis tax revenue as a partial solution to the state's fiscal problems. Senate President Pro Tem Martin Looney, a Democrat, introduced one of 4 standalone marijuana legalization bills considered by the legislature earlier this year. 2 committees held hearings on the issue, but none of the bills were brought to a vote. Now, the idea of ending prohibition and taxing cannabis is gaining new traction as the scheduled end of the legislative session approaches on June 7th, and lawmakers work to craft a budget. Lawmakers in the budget proposal released on Tuesday project that their legalization plan will bring in $60 million in revenue for the next fiscal year and $180 million by 2019. Washington's Governor Jay Inslee signed an omnibus bill of marijuana laws that cleared the Washington legislature last month. The omnibus bill contained more than a dozen different legal changes to cannabis laws in Washington, including forward progress on legalizing growing marijuana at home and creating the country's first state-run organic certification program for cannabis. The governor has also just legalized the right for adults to share marijuana with a friend without fear of breaking state law. Unbeknownst to most people, the law that legalized recreational marijuana in 2012 expressly forbids adults from sharing it with each other. Medical marijuana patients can now buy seeds and cannabis plants from producers as well, and the Liquor and Cannabis Board will study the feasibility of allowing every adult over 21 the right to grow cannabis at home. The law also enshrines a prohibition against businesses depicting cannabis plants or cartoons on any billboards. U.S. Senators Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat, and Maggie Hassan, Democrat, both of New Hampshire, introduced legislation to reauthorize the Office of National Drug Control Policy, ONDCP, also known as the Drug Czar's Office, which directs the National Drug Control Strategy and acts as the lead federal agency working to coordinate policy to combat the opioid epidemic. Earlier this month, reports indicated that the Trump administration's pending budget proposal would effectively eliminate ONDCP, which oversees the high-intensity drug trafficking area and drug-free communities programs. The legislation introduced by Shaheen and Hassan would reauthorize ONDCP, increase funding for these programs, and streamline the office to ensure efficient use of resources. Shaheen and Hassan's legislation would also increase the HIDTA authorization by $10 million. HIDTA provides assistance to federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies operating in areas determined to be critical drug trafficking regions in the United States. Larry Krasner, a defense attorney for 3 decades, best known for taking on civil rights cases for Black Lives Matter and Occupy Philadelphia members, AIDS activists, and protesters arrested at political conventions, easily defeated 6 other contenders Tuesday in the Democratic primary for district attorney in Philadelphia. With nearly 98% of the vote tallied Tuesday night, Krasner held nearly an 18-point lead on his closest Democratic rival. Krasner will face in the November 7th general election Beth Grossman, the lone Republican in her party's primary Tuesday. Krasner's primary victory is certain to set off rumblings of uncertainty in the district attorney's office. He has described it as, quote, a place with a mad zeal for the highest charge, for the highest level of conviction, a culture that can find no flaw in police misconduct, that is drunk on the death penalty, end quote. Krasner has said prosecuting marijuana possession is a, quote, tremendous waste of resources, end quote, and that not prosecuting could, quote, potentially save 125 lives a year, end quote, in the city from reductions in opioid overdose. Krasner has also sued law enforcement agencies or the government more than 75 times. Senator Rand Paul published an op-ed Monday at CNN taking Attorney General Jeff Sessions to task for his recent announcement that he will seek to enforce mandatory minimum sentencing laws that had been relaxed during the Obama administration. Senator Paul has tried to lead his party away from favoring these harsh federal mandates in recent years, and in a conversation on Monday, the senator seemed surprised by Sessions' latest move, despite the Attorney General's tough-on-crime reputation. Paul voted along with every other Republican and 1 Democrat to confirm Sessions in February. This has been your Cannabis Headline News for Wednesday, May 17th, 2017. I'm Russ Belville.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
At Herb Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's time for Cannabis Facts about Alzheimer's from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A new Florida study in the journal Molecular and Cellular Neuroscience found that cannabis promotes the growth of healthy new brain tissue. It can slow the effects of Alzheimer's and may in fact be able to halt it entirely. A long-term study by Ohio State University's Professor Gary Wenk concludes that people who regularly use marijuana get Alzheimer's at a much lower rate than others. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the gay agenda, only with better music.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the Freedom Leaf Preview with Steve Bloom from Freedom Leaf Magazine. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
This is the Cannabis Minority Report. The war on drugs has been called the new Jim Crow, for how it disproportionately polices and incarcerates people of color. As marijuana legalization proceeds, institutional barriers still prevent minorities from fully participating in the new industry. Today, we take a deeper look at these issues in the Cannabis Minority Report.
In today's Cannabis Minority Report, we return to the Not One Step Back strategy session held at Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia. Cassandra Frederique from Drug Policy Alliance is the moderator for a panel of survivors of the drug war that includes Kemba Smith.
At 12 years old, I was taken out of my house by the police and put into the juvenile system, where I spent the next 6 years going in and out of crazy foster homes, orphanages, delinquent girls' homes, you know, that whole thing. And that was for my safety, if you catch what I'm saying here. This was for my safety, supposedly, which put me in the system, which is like flypaper. By the time I turned 18, I had been arrested, and I was back in the bigger system. I wasn't with Susan, I was California Youth Authority, and then on parole for a number of years. And for my safety, once again, kind of, and for my safety while on parole, they would call you in, and we had something called the nailing program, where they would call you into a testing facility when they would shoot you up with nailing to test and see if you've been using drugs. And nailing is like naloxone. So if you were in any way strung out or using, you would get deathly sick right there, and they would bust you, and that's how they controlled the situation. And they finally outlawed. I did hear that someone burned down the building, so I thought that was kind of cool. But you know, this was how they dealt with things in the late 60s, and it was all for my safety. So as a parent, you know, I've watched my son go through 2 terms in the California state prisons. He has 6 felonies. We're in Florida now, so he can't vote. You know how that is, or anything else. And that was for his safety, too, because he was a nonviolent drug user. And you know, it's like, where are we going with this? And, you know, I'm watching all these kids now with the opioid epidemic. They are dragging kids out of homes and putting them in the foster system. They're going to grow up just like I did, where I got introduced to heroin and everything bad in the world. I learned in that place they put me to get safe, you know, and that's my issue with what's happening now, and that we're just dragging kids out of homes and putting them in foster care and putting them into a system that's going to hurt them more. So,
Well, Julia, you kind of answered the
Oh,
question
there's more?
that I was going to ask you, but I'm going to pull it out for everyone on this panel to talk about, is that we are in an opioid crisis. We are in that moment. You know, so there's conversations that are happening all over the country. There is a lot to be critical about, right? Because in places where I'm from, like in New York City, the crisis has always been ongoing. It has actually just been the way that we've lived. And it is affecting a different group of people in a different way, right? And we have to be more nuanced in the way that we talk about it. It's not that it's never affected white people. It has always affected white people, just not the white people that the state cares about.
Yep. Yep. That's right.
Right? And so it's like, so now it's affecting the kind of white people that the state cares about.
Yeah.
Right? And there is a different level of engagement. There's a different level of language. There is a very clear idea about what accountability looks like,
Yeah.
and what safety looks like, and what we're supposed to be investing in. However, even in this moment where people are saying we can't arrest our way out of the problem, they have already identified the people that are not a part of that spectrum.
Of that problem.
Those are the people that actually are the problem. And so I want to talk about people that sell drugs.
Doctors, you mean?
The doctors, pharmaceutical companies.
Pharmacists, farmer, you mean?
Any user, right? Because if we're going to talk about being survivors of the drug war, we know that surviving is a constant state. So even if you move to another part of the spectrum, as Shiloh brought in, you're still under the gaze and the control of the state. And so, Shaquita, I want to bring this to your table as you live in Louisiana. The question is, in this current state of the opioid crisis, and everyone deciding what safety is, let's move out of the drug war, the kind of stuff around that. Drug sellers have been identified as not a part of that conversation.
And I think, Louisiana is, we're special, right? We have a really strong law enforcement lobby, which is part of the reason why we're the #1 incarcerator. And I think a number of people are left out of conversations all the time, particularly around the drug war. For Women with a Vision, I think one of the things that we're trying to do to fix that is that I feel like, and I've kind of been in a quandary since November, like a lot of other folks. And I think that one of the things that we've been truly focused on, and a lot of our work is with Black women, right? And so Black women understand the drug war. We've been a part of it for a long time. We've had a lot of losses because of it. And so we're actually doing a lobby day, a legislative day, which amazingly is probably one of the first ones happening in Louisiana specifically for African American women, right? And what our issues are. As surprising as that is. But for us, it's just, I think that we're at a point where we are truly tired, right? Like, I just feel like there's so much, like, we can't keep with this kind of, we want to keep communities safe by getting drug dealers off your block and this and that, but at the end of the day, there is economic injustice, there's underlying trauma that people are experiencing. We don't want to address any of that, but we want to continue to incarcerate folks, right? And exclude people from conversations that they should be having. And I just think we're tired of it, and I feel like if I had the answer to what the strategy is, I would be probably rich in this capitalist society because I can pack it up and sell it, but just trying to move people, just trying to keep as many people involved as we can, and understanding that there is a good bit of power if we have to play within this system of capitalism and of voting and of two parties, then I think that we're well equipped to try to move forward and be a part of that.
Yeah, and Kemba, I'm going to come to you here. Specifically, drug sellers have been generally cast as demons in our society and called everything from terrorist to predatory. Why do you consider this a false narrative? And what structural and social realities are not considered when we paint drug dealers this way, or drug sellers this way?
The fact that I was sentenced to 24 and a half years the first time nonviolent thing is not pertinent. I mean, I don't think that even if I was a repeat offender, that I still shouldn't have received 24 and a half years. But I was a first-time nonviolent drug offender who was a college student who was sentenced to federal drug conspiracy where the federal government held me accountable for 255 keys of crack cocaine, even though the prosecutor said I never handled, sold, or used the drugs that were involved. My 86-year-old white judge, who was sleeping during the expert testimony about the domestic violence and abuse that occurred in my case, he said he wanted me to be a deterrent to others. And so, whatever, he died. He's not gonna be a deterrent. What he did was he allowed me to be a poster child for America and this country to see what a person that gets sentenced under these drug policy looks like, that it's not just your monster that's on the street corner selling drugs, that you are destroying families. And yes, someone may go out there and may not have any other alternative. They feel like that's their only choice to make it in this country because we have broken systems, broken educational systems. People can't get jobs. And so they go out and do something else. But just because they do that does not mean that they should get the rest of their lives taken away from them. And I turned myself in 7 months pregnant, and I can remember the day that I was sentenced, and there was a van full of other African American males that were with me. And when I got back in that van, you know, I knew what my sentence was, 24 and a half years, but every black brother that got in the van with me had received a life sentence. And you want to talk about recalling this war on drugs? Well, the deterrent that you thought that I was going to be, ever since I stepped foot out of federal prison, I cannot forget all of what I saw, all of the people that I became friends with. And so when I came out, I felt like Solomon in 12 Years a Slave. Because as I was walking out of federal prison, because Black America had taken on my story. They had me on the cover of a national black magazine called Emerge Magazine, and I thank George Curry for doing that and putting me on the cover. But understand that I was a no-name face, that he took a risk to put my no-name face on the cover to highlight Kimba's nightmare, inmate 26370-083. And so I became the poster child for this discussion. And I thank DPA, I thank Deborah Smalls, I thank Asha, because she read about my story while I was in prison. People embraced that story. I'm grateful for it, but at the same time, I was incarcerated with people that, just like you said, America didn't care about them. But I cared about them, and I cared about us. I cared about people who were from different countries and were over here, women that were traumatized in abusive relationships, get caught up in the system, and now they run the risk of, once they serve their time, they get deported back to their country away from their children.
Yep.
So I could not walk out of that situation and just walk away and forget. Not even a year out of being out of prison, I can remember being in a room with Deborah Smalls and working with the people that helped to bring me home. And I was frustrated, depressed, sad, because I could tell that this was gonna be so much time was gonna go by, and I knew what a day was like in prison.
Yeah.
And things weren't happening fast enough because I had people that were rooting for me coming out of prison that I knew needed to come home too. I have a friend, Michelle West, she's still serving a life sentence in federal prison. She's already served over 24 years.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. Subscribe now for free at mjagenda.com.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
This is Cannabis Facts from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org, supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. In 1937, the second most prescribed medicine, marijuana, was banned. It wasn't about marijuana. The paper, oil, and chemical industries lobbied to end hemp farming. No longer labor intensive, an acre of hemp produced more quality paper than 4 acres of trees. Plastics and fibers could be produced from a plant. Hemp can even produce 10 times the energy of today's ethanol. As marijuana prohibition ends, many states now allow farmers to again grow hemp. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to process America's hemp crop at hempinc.com.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's like I picked the wrong week to quit smoking.
Learn more at mjagenda.com.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for our Government at Work, the latest in cannabis reform at the local, state, federal, and international level. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Promoting the end of adult cannabis prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It's even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more on this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Well, today we take a little detour from the drug war data mines and we turn on the television, where this morning on TV's The 700 Club on the Christian Broadcasting Network, Pat Robertson, the octogenarian televangelist and former presidential candidate, had a lot to say to Attorney General Jeff Sessions following a report about Sessions reversing the Holder-era memo that reduced the use of mandatory minimum sentencing. The video was on the 700 Club this morning. We've got that video for you. Let's take a look at it.
File. Well, reaction has been mixed on a Justice Department memo to federal prosecutors, telling them to seek the toughest charges possible for crimes. Attorney General Jeff Sessions says the order is necessary to fight violence in some major cities and the spread of drugs.
Trust our prosecutors in the field to make good judgments. They deserve to be unhandcuffed and not micromanaged from Washington. Rather, they must be permitted to apply the law to the facts of each investigation. Let's be clear. We are forcing the laws that Congress has passed. That is both our fundamental mission and our constitutional duty.
Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton says it will cut crime. But former Attorney General Eric Holder says the move is unwise and ill-informed. And Republican Senator Rand Paul says mandatory minimums are unfair and disproportionately affect minorities. Back to you.
We did a very important series called The Nation of Criminals, and we showed that the United States has more people incarcerated than any other nation on the face of the earth. It is unbelievable. What's out there, especially on these minor drug offenses, the possession of a few ounces of marijuana, a few ounces of cocaine, gives somebody a 5 to 10 year sentence. It's just outrageous. And our jails are full. We can't afford it. And it's unproductive. And the idea of mandatory minimum, they said you got some 80-year-old grandmother and she gets a parking ticket and that's the third one she's got, so she's got to go to jail for the rest of her life. I mean, these things are insane. And the idea of making it tougher instead of changing it, we ought to take away those mandatory minimums and let judges have some discretion so that they can deal with cases as they arise. And what we must do is put in counseling. We must have some kind of mechanism whereby victims are taken care of by the perpetrators instead of just automatically lock them up. What good does that do? And it's very, very expensive. So the idea, these people are, quote, tough on crime. That's nonsense. Our country is groaning under the weight of incarceration. And, we were farming it out to private businesses, and they were getting paid on the number of people they could get locked up and keep locked up. I mean, this is insane. And we just must do something to stop the incarceration of all these people. And for the Attorney General to say, well, let's enforce every law that Congress has made, dear me, Congress has gone overboard on this tough on crime stuff. And I agree with Senator Paul. It falls disproportionately on the minorities, on the poor, on the urban blacks, etc. And they're just not fair. And it's time something is done to change the laws. So, yes, if there are evil people in gangs doing terrible things, by all means, lock them up and throw away the key. In terms of human traffickers, I would execute them. I think they're just horrible what they do. But in terms of just these minor offenses and say, let's get tough on crime, no way. Terry?
That's Christian broadcaster Pat Robertson earlier today on the 700 Club, echoing what many of us in drug law reform have been saying for years, and that is that we have far too much of a emphasis on incarceration in this country, far too much of an emphasis on punishment without any sort of way of trying to rehabilitate people. Just trying to throw the book at them isn't going to work. And it's weird to be in a situation where I have to agree with Pat Robertson, because we couldn't be more ideologically and philosophically opposed if you designed him in a lab. But on this issue, we agree. It's great that he's using the point about being smart on crime. This is a tag that has been used by Rick Steves for years. He's one of the Normal board members, and you probably know him from the PBS Rick Steves Europe series. You see him on the local public broadcasting series out there in Barcelona or Milan or wherever he happens to be. He's an award-winning writer as well for these travel guides. And he, for years, has been speaking about the European perspective on drugs as it being smart on crime rather than being tough on crime. And one of his lines is that Europeans learned a long time ago, being that their societies are much, much older than ours, that you can either tolerate and regulate alternative lifestyles, or you can build more prisons. And the United States, unfortunately, has taken the tack of building more prisons. It's time for us to understand toleration of our lifestyles and regulation of them is a far better and smarter approach to criminal justice issues. Jeff Sessions is a throwback to the mid-1980s. He harkens for the Just Say No era of Nancy Reagan. And if this is what the administration believes will make America great again, I'm sorry, they've got it completely wrong. We have learned the lessons of mass incarceration. We've learned the lesson that mandatory minimum sentencing, while it's designed to go after the kingpins, rarely gets them. We've learned that mandatory minimum sentencing ensnares the low-level folks, the people like Kemba Smith that was on the earlier segment, the people who are the girlfriends or the couriers or the low-level dealers who have no one to turn on, who have no bargaining chips in the plea bargain process. They're the ones who end up doing the mandatory minimum sentences. So for Jeff Sessions to continue along this path is so wrong-headed and threatens to reverse so much progress that we've made in this country reforming our criminal justice system. So today, and maybe for one of the few times ever, my hat is off to Christian broadcaster Pat Robertson, standing up and speaking truth to power. Let's hope a lot of his audience, older Christian folks who vote, get the message.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association and the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit MJBA.net for more details.
It's time for Cannabis Facts about teen drug use from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A recent survey by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control indicates that in states that have legalized medical marijuana, the rate of marijuana consumption among high school students has not increased. In fact, in legal states like Colorado, teen use has actually decreased significantly. It's simply no longer a big deal for teenagers in legal states. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the alcohol agenda. But a lot safer.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for the Marijuana Policy Insider with Marijuana Policy Project. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Welcome to the Southwest Cannabis Chronicle. Today, we catch you up on the latest news and speak with an expert from the sunny southwestern region of America, from the Lone Star State all the way to the islands of Hawaii, including the evolution of consumer cannabis in Las Vegas and the rest of Nevada. Grab your sunscreen and drink plenty of fluids. It's time for the Southwest Cannabis Chronicle.
Welcome, everyone, to this inaugural episode of the Southwest Cannabis Chronicle as we take a look at what's happening in the states, ranging all the way from Texas and to the most southwest state, the state of Hawaii, which is where we go today. And we're speaking with Brian Murphy, who's joining us by telephone. Brian, welcome to the show.
Aloha, Russ.
Glad to have you here, and give folks a little bit of your background, because I know you've been active in the cannabis politics in Hawaii for quite some time.
I've been active in the cannabis industry ever since John Getman was national director of NORML. I started there and pretty much spent the last 30 years traveling around, and for the last approximately 15, been working out here in the state of Hawaii. Best place in the world to grow pot. What can I say?
I doubt few people would argue with you on that one. And the state of Hawaii, of course, is one of the first states to have passed a medical cannabis law, which was originally handled by your law enforcement department, oddly enough. I understand that's been changed to the health department. But what is the state of Hawaii's cannabis program at this point?
Currently, this is part of our argument with them in my upcoming case here. As you said, it was supposed to have been transferred over from the NED, which is Narcotic Enforcement Administration, to the Department of Health. But one of the little quirky things that are coming out in this illegal eviction, I'm actually being evicted out of my house of 5 years, where I've had my medical license and have been producing for myself and 3 other patients consistently all that time. And it's basically someone from the mainland who owns the property who's stating that since federal banking laws are federal laws, they don't have to abide by Hawaii laws, which says I have the right to grow cannabis. The eviction was totally crazy, but what also came out was in her ranting and raving at us, she was getting information about medical marijuana patients here in the state of Hawaii. She lives in Wisconsin, and this was all being done through the police department, who technically are not supposed to have the knowledge that they seem to be having.
So we have a situation, who's in charge? So the eviction is coming from the owner of the property, who is out of state, out in the mainland in Wisconsin. And
correct.
Being enforced by law enforcement. Are you out of the house now, or what's the status?
Well, what we did, again, I get this crazy eviction notice. They ramped it up. They called the cops on me. They had the police at the house. Again, I ran Patients Without Time here in Maui from 2004 to 2008 when I got arrested for running a dispensary. I actually did get incarcerated in 2014. I was sentenced to 1 year in jail. I ended up doing approximately 5 months and got out because of a medical issue, which is part of why I didn't want to go in to start with.
What precipitated this particular move by the landlord? I mean, it's been the same landlord for years, hasn't it?
Correct. What happened approximately back in January of this year, there was a big article in the paper how in Maui the rents are doubling. You can double the rent. And basically that's what started this whole thing. Was they were trying to basically get me to, I have a brand new lease, good to go for a year, but they're saying it wasn't for enough money, so it was an invalid lease. And that's when they started fishing for how to evict us. Now, the way they went about it turns out is totally illegal. And here in the state of Hawaii, we do have protections under the law, at least, with the Department of Health protecting our rights to grow medical cannabis. But from a manipulation standpoint, the landlord or the homeowner from the mainland thought she saw a way of wedging us out of the property because of marijuana. And it was all threats. It's a bizarre story, Russ, when you hear the whole thing. She actually had some lady wrote a letter that I was threatening them with machine guns, sent it to the lady in Wisconsin. The lady in Wisconsin then sends it to the Maui police. And I come home the day I got my eviction notice with police in the driveway saying that, they're here looking for this crazy lady. And when they found out my name, they asked me if I had threatened her, and I said no. And they go, "Oh, don't worry, we know this lady. Where is she?" Cop goes, sees the lady, comes back and tells me, "Don't worry, Mr. Murphy, she's back on her medication. We've dealt with this woman for years." So they got this crazy lady making stories up as in like I was going to shoot their house up with a machine gun and shit, which she's the property manager, which basically I'm on probation right now. Something like that gets me thrown in jail and I don't get bailed out. Luckily for me, the cop knew this woman and had a history with her that he didn't put any stock in what she was saying. But what it is a mainland homeowner trying to manipulate the Maui market for more money and feeling they can get away with threatening us about our marijuana use and growth and stuff. And she actually did call the DEA and the NED, all kinds of people on me. So here I'm doing with this crazy eviction notice. And when I went to the lawyer, he goes, well, what's going to happen, Brian, is they're going to hire a lawyer. Once they hire a lawyer, they're going to change up and get you evicted anyway. So after discussion with my partner, Mary, I was out of that place in 5 days flat. The lady did not see me leaving that quickly. So right now we do have an attorney, Madsen Kelly here in Maui, a very good reputable firm, who is taking our case on, and it's all going to be based on all the crazy allegations that that they initially evicted us on, and we just reacted to quickly. So by keeping it that way, we can now just focus on, no, that's totally illegal. You cannot discriminate against someone here in the state of Hawaii for using medical marijuana. And we plan on pushing the case pretty hard.
Now, that protection you mentioned, is that written into the Hawaii medical marijuana program, this no discrimination you mentioned?
Yes, on housing, yes.
All right.
The way they worked it out here, the only way they can discriminate you here in the state of Hawaii is if you're in like a condominium association where they have rules and regulations already established that you're not allowed to smoke. From that standpoint, they can curtail your ability to consume in a condominium association, but you already have to have those rules in place and enforced before you can enforce them. But anywhere else, you are allowed to consume and grow.
I see. And so this wouldn't apply to you. You're not in a condominium association. You're in a home. And it sounds as if this woman who owns the home had never had a problem with the medical marijuana in the past.
Oh, no. For 5 years, I was the best tenant they ever knew. And, we never had any issue, not one issue the whole time. And unfortunately, it gets down to money and them trying to manipulate people just because they use marijuana. They feel they can get away with intimidating us.
It is such a shame that they're going through with this. Has this been affecting any other patients that you're aware of in Hawaii as far as their cultivation or use of cannabis goes?
Yes, and that is why Mary and I decided to basically take a bullet for the team and just, okay, you want us out, we're out, we'll see you in court, we have a legal binding lease, and we're going to stand up for that. And that's basically what we did was, fortunately, we jumped out in the time limit or the time span where, no, all these points that she brought up initially trying to intimidate us out will be the ones we get to bring up in court.
Well, it sounds as if you've got a pretty good case building here, and I don't see anything as far as Hawaii law goes that would give her a leg to stand on, trying to say that it's federally illegal and therefore we can break a lease that we've already signed. I sure hope this goes your way. Brian, if there's listeners out there that are interested in more details in the story, or perhaps Hawaii listeners who are facing the same problem, do you have any contact information or resources they could use?
Yeah, I still have my organization. It's called Patients Without Time. We're based here in Maui, Paia, Hawaii. They can find us quite easily either on Facebook or just on the internet. Right now, we're waiting, and we just heard back I had filed a complaint with the Hawaii Discrimination Board. And right now, we've just finished the questionnaire and did get a call back where we're also approaching this case that is actually a discrimination case. I'm a disabled American veteran, and there's all sorts of topics that are going to come up around this issue, as in, they're pushing to close down home cultivation in Hawaii. We basically can only grow for other patients until 2/18. Our dispensaries are not open. But what's going on, it seems, is we only have the 8 dispensaries. We went for the corporate model where just a couple people control the whole industry, which really sucks. And right now we're starting to see the pressure of this industry coming on board, coming after everybody doing their own homegrown at this time. And we are working with other patients here in Maui County on trying to put together a marijuana guild just to represent all the different aspects of the different people in the industry. It's really sad how here in Hawaii, where we have worldwide name branding already incorporated to our product, that they're going down the route of only corporations, and basically only 8 different dispensaries here in the state will control the whole industry. currently here in Maui, the black market price is between $2.50 an ounce for really quality medicine. While the word is once these clubs open up in June, it's going to bounce up to $4.55 per ounce. My big question is, where do all these disabled vets that I work with now get their medicine? Currently, we create these little HUIs or groups growing, as a group, and they're trying to get rid of all that as they're changing the legislation.
Yeah, this is such a mistake as states that didn't have dispensaries move to include dispensaries as part of their programs. They feel they then need to get rid of the home cultivation, often from the pressure from the corporate cultivators, like you mentioned. It's just a tragedy, and I see no reason why you need to stop the home cultivators that are providing medicine for patients. We do want to have more access for patients as far as a commercial option in the dispensaries, but that's not an excuse to get rid of the home cultivation that is helping so many patients. And Brian, you've been doing a great job of that for decades, helping yourself, helping other patients, and we appreciate the work that you're doing. Give out the website one more time for people before we let you go.
www.patientswithouttime.com.
All right. Brian Murphy out there in Hawaii, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing, and best of luck in your upcoming cases.
Aloha, much mahalo.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. Subscribe now for free at mjagenda.com.
It's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson for NORML. And I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact NORML at NORML.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORML.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the Northwest Cannabis Chronicle from the Marijuana Business Association. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show.
Encourage people to use less drugs.
I inhaled.
That was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of Colorado.
Good people don't smoke marijuana.
I was looking through the news the other day, and one of the states that has legalized marijuana, I want to think it's California, but maybe it was Nevada. Their legislature was considering a bill or a proposal for a bill about the ominous marijuana gummies, these offensive marijuana gummies. It was one of these bills about edibles, and the whole point was to prevent the manufacture of edible products that would be appealing to children. And of course, this is always around the gummy bears. And there was recently a story about another one of these ingestions in this state where the kid got into some marijuana gummy that the parent had left out in the car, and the kid got into it and they had to take him to the emergency room and so forth. And these kind of stories fuel these kind of laws, and these crisis stories make for really bad lawmaking and a really unfair way to treat us adult cannabis consumers. Because I don't know about you, but I like gummy bears. I like gummy candies. I think they taste good, and they're handy to have around, especially if you're going to be getting on a plane or going someplace where you can't use a vaporizer or smoke marijuana. Why should we adults be restricted to having tasteless, bland, shapeless, no-colored, opaque products to have to choose from because some parents, some adults might be irresponsible and let the kids get into these products? The thing that really bothers me about this is why we have this over concern about the kids getting into the marijuana gummies when we have seemingly so little concern about everything else they get into that is directly marketed to them, that we allow to be directly marketed to them. Everything from the McDonald's Happy Meal to the cereal aisle, where these cereals are little more than candy in flake form. I mean, they literally have cookie cereals and chocolate cereals. And these are marketed to kids. They have all sorts of little toy prizes and cartoon characters. It's God forbid we put a cartoon of a pot plant on a billboard in Washington State, but they can use a cartoon rabbit and a cartoon captain and all sorts of cartoons to sell these sugary cereals that are going to do more long-term damage to these kids than any single exposure to a marijuana gummy bear. We have the incidence of type 2 diabetes among children that is skyrocketing in this country and dwarfs that of most other countries. We have a terrible incidence of obesity among our children. This is part and parcel a piece of this agribusiness industry, the corn syrup industry, these food manufacturers that are manufacturing junk. And I'm not the kind to be the nanny state and ban this sort of thing. I'm not going to pull a Michael Bloomberg and say we need to have soda taxes and ban super big gulps or anything like that. Again, I'm for freedom. I'm for choice. I'm just saying, if we've got that freedom to market the Happy Meals and the sugared cereals to these kids, then to turn around and say that you're super concerned about a marijuana gummy bear seems to me a bit disingenuous. And I know the response that we get back is, well, Russ, this is different. It's a drug. These marijuana gummy bears, they got a powerful drug in them. They're a drug, for God's sake. Yeah, and so are a whole lot of other things that are drugs. We got vodka. We got prescriptions. We got all sorts of things that are drugs. And these things are manufactured in ways that appeal to adults, like flavored vodkas. You know, I think they're disgusting, but some people like these things, these flavored vodkas that are out there, these Mike's Hard Lemonades, these hard sodas, these hard ciders that are coming around. Those are more appealing to the youth. I know when I was a kid, what got me started in drinking was Bartles and James wine coolers. And that's just one of the side effects of being a free society, is we're going to have to accept that kids will be enticed by some of this stuff. I got my hands on the Bartles and James wine cooler at age 16. It's going to happen. And the real question is, what's the actual harm that is coming of it? I'm telling you, more actual harm came from my Bartles and James wine cooler experiences than any marijuana experiences I've ever had in my life. And the same is going to be true for kids and the marijuana gummy bears. And all you do in this situation, when you put these absurd restrictions on the promotion, the advertising, the packaging, and the type of things that can be manufactured, is you just drive it underground. It's not hard to make a gummy bear. Very easy. In fact, I recently saw some recipes come across the internet for making wine gummy bears. Infuse your gummy bears with wine. And nobody's raising a hue and cry about that and how the kids might get into the wine gummy bear. We have gummy vitamins. You get the Flintstones like gummy vitamins. And if you take too many of some of these vitamin supplements, it can do some harm to you. But nobody's raising a hue and cry about the kids overdosing on the Flintstones gummy vitamins. And to really blow your mind, recently the FDA approved a gummy formulation of an ADHD medication. That's right, folks. Pharmaceutical gummy meth is available. Your doctor can prescribe a gummy form of Adderall to your kid for hyperactivity. That isn't raising any sort of hue and cry about, oh my God, what if somebody leaves out the gummy meth and the kids get into it? This is more scaremongering that all it does is restrict the rights of adults, restricts our choices without really addressing what the root problem is. And that is bad parenting. That is adults being irresponsible. The key to that is education, not restrictions. Education. That is what's going to make the difference in this case. It's the only thing that can make a difference in this case. Not driving it underground where there's going to be even less control over how it's manufactured, over whether or not there's harmful contaminants involved, into what's actually containing, what percentage of THC does it actually have in it. Let's keep this above board. Let's keep this as part of the regulated market. And stop with the silly restrictions that are going to do nothing to stop kids from getting into this stuff and everything to restrict our choices. That's all the time we got for the podcast. Thanks for joining us. Live listeners, stay tuned. We're back with Toker Talk Radio.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and SoundCloud. And follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
I'm Russ Belville for everyone here at Delta 9 Studios. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
Take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.
Name something that gets passed around.
A joint.
A joint.
Now, streaming live on the Marijuana Agenda.
Really? What are you people? On dope?
It's time for Toker Talk Radio.
Hey, this is great, man.
The voice of the Marijuana Nation.
Marijuana is listed as a Schedule I drug. That is absurd.
Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ. That's 650-534-2565.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
Hey, man. Am I driving okay?
Toker Talk Radio is your chance to make your voice heard in the Marijuana Nation.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Poop Dog.
Send that message with clarity that good people don't smoke marijuana.
Now let's get to Toking and Talking with your host, Russ Belville.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Time for Toker Talk Radio. So glad to have you here. Like my jacket? Loud, isn't it? My goal to become the Craig Sager of marijuana podcasters. So rest in peace, Craig Sager. Bow tie going. There's a real bow tie too, folks. We're not messing around with any of that fake stuff. No siree. Speaking about not messing around, I don't know if you saw my Twitter feed earlier today. There was a great story in High Times that was called something like Walking Among the Giants, and it profiled the huge cannabis trees that they grow down in Southern Oregon. And there's a big old picture, guy on a stepladder trimming a 15, 20-foot cannabis tree. So it's pretty amazing. Check that out on High Times if you get the chance. And there's another story out that I got a problem with, and that is about Miley Cyrus. Our friend Steve Bloom out at Celeb Stoner has published the most recent story on Miley Cyrus. If you haven't heard, Miley apparently has given up weed. She no longer is pro-weed, and now she is dissing the rest of us. Yes, dissing the rest of us, folks. And this is from celebstoner.com, and she was apparently some interview she was doing. And in the report, according to Steve Bloom out there, gotta find it. Miley Cyrus stops smoking pot, knocks stoners. She was in a cover story in Billboard magazine. She said, quote, "I like to surround myself with people that make me want to get better, more evolved, open. And I was noticing it's not the people that are stoned. I want to be super clear and sharp because I know exactly where I want to be." End quote. Well, first of all, to be pedantic, it's not the people who are stoned, not people that are stoned. But I know your education probably wasn't the tops, but let's just break this down. What she's saying here. I like to surround myself with people that make me want to get better, more evolved, open. So maybe it's just the choice of people you're hanging out with, Miley, not necessarily people that are getting stoned. You know, there's a whole broad spectrum of us, don't you? Like maybe you're just hanging out with assholes. Maybe that's the problem. Then she says, I was noticing it's not the people that are stoned, who are stoned. So saying basically that people that want to get stoned don't want to get better, evolved, or open, which is, again, bullshit. And then finally, I want to be super clear and sharp because I know exactly where I want to be. Well, yeah, clear and sharp is a matter of moderation. You notice that I don't smoke weed or do dabs before doing the news. I got to do a 5-minute cold news read. So no, I want to be clear and sharp. Then after 420, I smoke some weed, right? It's a matter of timing. And maybe, you know, being a young person, you're 24 now, started smoking apparently when you were 18. Maybe this is just a function of youth and we should cut you a little bit of slack. But as far as I'm concerned, from now on, that Miley Cyrus is dead to me. The only Miley Cyrus I care about is this Miley Cyrus. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that's my chick. That is a early picture of Miley Cyrus, my blonde chicken. She's like 3 times that big now. She's huge. Sits on my shoulder, eats out of my hand. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I have a pet chicken. It's the damnedest thing. Who'd have thought I'd ever become a chicken farmer? Anyway, coming up on the show today in hour 2, more news about marijuana. We're going to talk a little bit about a new report. Bureau of Justice Statistics has put out this report, Indicators of School Crime and Safety for 2016. But the prominent finding in there for us has to do, of course, with whether or not legalization has caused the kids to use more of the devil's lettuce. We've also got news. We'll do some roundup from around the states. I'll update you on that California Assembly bill on banning marijuana edibles that could appeal to children. And we've got also the Delaware Senate, Florida regulators, Rhode Island, Nevada, Virginia, Minnesota, New York, West Virginia, and Texas. A lot of states that are moving forward here. Also, an update on a story we told you about yesterday out of Mobile, Alabama, where the mayor there had proposed a decriminalization policy to allow police to not make arrests for marijuana possession. The city council now has deferred action on that proposal. Also, we have a deferred action in Wichita, Kansas, where their city council has deferred action on an ordinance to lower marijuana penalties in that city. We'll keep you abreast of what's happening at the local, state, national, and international level as best we can with our partners at marijuanamoment.net. Make sure you go to marijuanamoment.net and subscribe to Tom Angel's daily newsletter. It's where I get my news. It's where you should get yours. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. Stick around.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb and licensed by the City of Portland.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the conservative agenda, minus the hypocrisy.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for Police for Reform with Law Enforcement Action Partnership. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Hello, Mr. Man. Hi. I'm working. I'm sorry. No food till this is done. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
Welcome back, everybody. Just adjusting a few things because I got a new picture for you. My roommate came running down the stairs. Oh my God, I forgot to send you this picture. So here you go. If you're curious about how Miley looks now, there's me and Miley Cyrus, our chicken. One of 4 chickens. We also have a Lady Gaga, a Jennifer Aniston, and a Rihanna. But Miley is the most people friendly. She definitely loves people. There she is sitting on my shoulder and pecking, I believe, at my lips. So, yes, she's beautiful. Let me zoom in there just a little bit. If you'd like to see just how big she's become, I can that photo just a little bit. Here we go. There you go. There's Miley Cyrus losing her down, starting to get her feathers. And as the weather heats up here in the Pacific Northwest, we'll begin to have our chickens outside because it's actually quite stinky. All right, let's get to some marijuana news. Bureau of Justice Statistics has a report out. Indicators of school crime and safety for 2016. And some of the preliminary data show that there were 48 school-associated violent deaths from 2013 to 2014. In 2015, among students aged 12 to 18, there were 841,100 non-fatal victimizations at school and 545,100 non-fatal victimizations away from school. In 2015, about 21% of students 12 to 18 reported being bullied at school during the school year. And of 804 total hate crimes reported on college campuses in 2014, the most common type of hate crime was intimidation, followed by destruction, damage, vandalism, and simple assault. So this is a report that's on school crime and safety. So that's its primary findings that they're going to tout. But you dig into this report, and what you find is the Department of Education telling us that legalization of marijuana has really had no effect on the teen use of marijuana in the United States, either in the states that have legalized or the ones that have not. And of course, this is echoing what we're hearing across the board from Washington, from Colorado, from Oregon, is no statistically significant change in the use of marijuana by youth. And it stands to reason. If you really think about it, for years and years and years, kids have had easy access to marijuana. Anybody that's wanted to smoke marijuana as a young person can find someone, can find a guy, can get access to it and use it. How would putting that into adult regulated stores that check ID increase their access to marijuana? Now, I've had people say, well, Russ, we have legal weed and, we have legal alcohol, and everybody knows when they were kids, they used to find a guy to sneak into the store and buy some alcohol. Like, yes, had to find a guy, which is what teenagers do now when they want marijuana. They find a guy. Now, are they going to find a guy who's growing the plants in his basement and treating him with Eagle 20 and not flushing him very well and ripping him off on the weight? Or are they going to find a guy who then goes to a pot shop and shows ID and then goes to a clerk and pays the state taxes and gets a product that's tested and regulated and then gives it to those kids. Because in addition to the kids who are sneaking around and getting the weed, getting something that's tested and verified and guaranteed, we're also putting their guy through the gauntlet of going through an ID check and dealing with a clerk and dealing with security cameras and all of that, that increase the chance that we can bust that guy for being a straw purchaser or a supplier to minors. How often does the guy that the teenager goes and deals with now on the illicit market, how often is that guy being filmed by security cameras, having his ID checked, having some sort of record of purchases that have been made, and how often? No, nothing we do is ever going to stop a person who's determined from getting their hands on weed from getting their hands on weed. But the idea that legalization is somehow going to make it easier for kids to get weed, when for the past 42 years, we've asked them, how easy is it to get weed? And 80% of them to 90% of them say, it's easy, fairly easy to get weed. Like, how are we going to make it any easier? How was putting it in adults-only stores that check ID going to increase the ease higher than 80%? Higher than the 90%, which was the peak? How is it going to get any worse by regulating it, taxing it, and putting it in stores that check ID? That's the primary thing we're finding from the legalization of marijuana. And this report from Bureau of Justice Statistics is just underscoring that for us. This, what about the children scare? One of the few scares they've got left. What about the children? Oh my God, we've got to restrict what adults might do because what about the children? One of the last scares they've got left, and it's beginning to fall on deaf ears. There were many, I think, on the fence, kind of reticent to support changes in reforming marijuana laws, that after Colorado and Washington passed in 2012, took a wait and see approach. Let's see what happens. Maybe the sky will fall. Maybe terrible things will happen. 2013 passed, and 2015, and 2015, and 2016. And 5 years later, they find themselves looking around at Colorado and Washington, and yeah, they heard some stories about, some edibles, and maybe they heard some stories about some auto fatalities. But then they tried to find the actual bodies, tried to see what's the act, and didn't find, and found that lacking. And they looked around and found that really not much changed in Colorado or Washington, aside from the state raking in tax money hand over fist. And that's why we're seeing these Gallup polls, these Pew Research polls, these CBS News polls topping 55, 60% support nationwide for marijuana legalization. Only people left who muster any opposition to this are over the age of 65 and Republican. Your Fox News demographic is the last bastion of reefer madness prohibition mindset. And even that's starting to fade away, partially from natural attrition. They're dying. But as more of their senior friends begin discovering the benefits of cannabis, as more of these older people realize, wait a minute, it's not just Chong smoking a joint, but cannabis is also a salve, a medicine, a cream, a spray, an inhaler, a cookie. That we've been demonizing and rejecting this wonderful source of relief simply because of our hatred of smoking and the dirty looking joint and the greasy fingers and the mustachioed faces that are put on TV day after day after day and the stock footage. I've seen this same guy on CNN smoking a raggly little pinner joint in a stock footage shot for the past 8 years now. So this is the image that continues to be maintained among some people. There's something unseemly about it, that there's something dirty, something low class about marijuana. Now, we don't want to see it go the other direction. We don't want to see marijuana become gentrified and rarefied where it's only for the elite. Don't think that's possible. It is a weed. It will always, always be available. We will always be smoking it. There's nothing you can do to stop it. But now as we see this what about the children scare with the gummy bears being brought up again to try to restrict and retard the development of marijuana legalization. It's great to have these studies coming out saying in black and white that it's not changing what's happening with the kids. And the other thing that's fun about this too, some of the other stats that they chart on this, in addition to how often the kids are using marijuana, they ask them their perceptions of it. So they ask them, do you disapprove of people that smoke marijuana? Do you think they're bad people? Smoke pot. And they ask them, how harmful do you think it is if you regularly smoke pot? And the answers to these questions have been changing in a way that was predicted by the opponents of drug reform. They're actually right on this one. As we've legalized, as we've medicalized, fewer kids think regularly smoking pot is a nasty, evil, bad thing. And fewer kids think smoking pot regularly is a terribly dangerous thing. Their perception of risk and their acceptance of it have changed. Their perception of risk has declined and their disapproval of it has declined. But the thing they predicted would happen because of that hasn't happened. They predicted, as the kids think it's more safe, more of them will do it. And they predicted, as the kids approve of it more, they'll do it more. It'll send the wrong message to the kids, we were told. It'll send the message that pot smoking's okay and it's harmless and everybody should do it. And the next thing you know, we'll have streets full of teenage pot zombies. And it didn't happen. And in fact, it so didn't happen that Dr. Nora Volkow from National Institutes of Drug Abuse was actually quoted as saying, we thought it would go up. It didn't go up. We can't explain it. It's blowing our mind. And the reason it's blowing their mind is because a lot of these people, a lot of these high-level PhD types have their heads up in the clouds, their nose in a book, their face on a screen.
There are white folks, and then there are ignorant motherfuckers like you.
Or you could put it like that. They got their heads in the clouds, and they don't know what real pot smokers are like, how the real cannabis consumer behaves. Well, that's why they got me and you to keep them straight. All right, we got to take a break. It's 4:20, and that means it's time for a safety briefing. You know, union rules and all. We'll be right back.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's time for Cannabis Facts About Alzheimer's from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A new Florida study in the journal Molecular and Cellular Neuroscience found that cannabis promotes the growth of healthy new brain tissue. It can slow the effects of Alzheimer's and may in fact be able to halt it entirely. A long-term study by Ohio State University's Professor Gary Wenk concludes that people who regularly use marijuana get Alzheimer's at a much lower rate than others. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors, and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the gay agenda, only with better music.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every Friday for the Reefer Rock Review with Herb Thrasher from 420radio.org. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Jag heter David, a.k.a. Dirtball. Vi ska röka hela tiden, alla år.
It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
Welcome back, everybody, on Toker Talk Radio for this segment. I've got the latest information from Quest Diagnostics. And Quest Diagnostics, if you do not know, is the nation's leading drug test supplier for workplaces. And so they have this drug testing index that they do every year to let everyone know how many people and how often are failing their drug tests for work. And the headline coming from Quest Diagnostics is, increases in illicit drugs, including cocaine, drive workforce drug positivity to highest rate in 12 years, Quest Diagnostic analysis finds. Cocaine, marijuana, and methamphetamine use up broadly among United States workforce across multiple specimen types and testing populations. Marijuana positivity increases significantly in 3 years. Also, with this data, they've got an interesting map. It's an interactive map for every, I think it's the congressional districts or how they down. 3-digit zip codes. Okay. So they're breaking this down by 3-digit zip code. You can hover over your region and find out what your drug test positivity rate is. And it's darker green for more drug test positives. So guess what? Out here in the legal state of Oregon, there's some pretty high rates there. The Oregon rate, 6.3%, while the national average is 4.2%. Looking here in Multnomah County, our zip codes are coming in at a 6.3%. So a lot of people failing their drug tests, and you can find out by going to DTIDrugMap.com. D Delta Tango India. DTIDrugMap.com, and you can find your zip code and zoom in to find out your drug testing rate. And the head of the drug testing people out at Quest Diagnostics, at least their spokesperson, is the Senior Director of Science and Technology. His name is, wait for it, Dr. Barry Sample. Yes, the company that tests the pee for your workplace, the head of them is Dr. Barry Sample. So anyway, Dr. Sample says, quote, this year's findings are remarkable because they show increased rates of drug positivity for the most common illicit drugs across virtually all drug test specimen types and in all testing populations. Our analysis suggests that employers committed to creating a safe drug-free work environment should be alert to the potential for drug use among their workforce, end quote. First of all, folks, ain't no such thing as a drug-free work environment. Ain't no such thing. People on prescription drugs all over the place. People are taking over the counter drugs all over the place. People are going to lunch and drinking alcohol. People are going outside for breaks and smoking cigarettes. People are going into the break room and consuming caffeine and sugar. But don't tell me there's a drug-free workforce. It's basically, you're talking about, do we have a druggie-free workforce? That's what you want. You want a druggie-free workforce. Druggie being defined as people who take the drugs you don't like. Those people. It's discrimination, plain and simple. But looking at their data are quite interesting. They say marijuana positivity increases dramatically over the last 3 years. Increases in Colorado and Washington double the national average. Colorado and Washington, the first states in which recreational marijuana use was legalized, the overall urine positivity rate for marijuana outpaced the national average in 2016 for the first time since the statutes took effect. The increase was more pronounced in Colorado, which increased 11% in 2015 versus 2016, than in Washington, which increased 9% in 2015 versus 2016. The national positivity rate for marijuana in the general U.S. workforce in urine testing increased 4%. From 2.4% to 2.5%. So 2.5% of people that go in to take a workplace drug test fail that workplace drug test for marijuana. 2.5%. So that's 1 out of 40, right? 1 out of 40 people fails their workplace drug test for marijuana. Now, we know from self-report surveys in the United States that around 8% of the people smoke marijuana monthly. Interesting. We know in states like Vermont and Colorado, more than 1 out of 7 people in Vermont over the age of 12, and 1 out of 3 between 18 and 25 are smoking pot monthly. In Colorado, it's 1 out of 6. Of all people 12 and older, 1 out of 6 are smoking pot monthly. So let's think about that for a second, folks. You got states where 1 out of 6 to 1 out of 7 people are smoking pot monthly. You got a nation where it's about 8% are smoking pot monthly. That's 1 out of, 16? 8 times, 1 out of 12. 12 times 8 is 70. Carry this. Yeah, 1 out of 12. You get a nation where 1 out of 12 people are smoking pot monthly, but only 1 out of 40 are failing a workplace drug test. Makes me think that there's a whole lot of people that smoke pot that are not getting caught by the tests. Regardless of the positivity rate increasing, it's not even coming close to catching all of us that are really smoking pot. Nowhere near. And we know the drill. And what's really frustrating about the whole drug testing charade is the employers know we smoke pot. We know we smoke pot and we fake the P tests, and they know that we stopped smoking pot for a while to get past the P tests. And really what it's come down to is we don't mind, and I've heard this from employers in one form or another, is that they really don't mind if you're a pot smoker. The drug test is really just to see how committed a pot smoker are you. Are you such a committed pot smoker you can't pass a P test? Is it so important to you that you just can't give it up for 2, 3, 4 weeks, drink a lot of water, pass the test? That's what it's really come down to, is they just want to see. It's, in a sense, it's kind of like a loyalty test, isn't it? Kind of like a loyalty test. Can you prove that you love your paycheck so much that you're willing to alter your personal private behavior in a way that's pleasing to us and has absolutely no bearing on your work and this job at all? Just a loyalty test. It's just a way of proving that, gotcha, they got the control over you. And that's really part and parcel of American employment as it is. I mean, think about our healthcare system and how our healthcare is tied to our employment. And this really ties into weed if you think about it, because what is it that they don't like about medical marijuana? It's not that it's a plant that cures all these things. Shit, they love that. New products, awesome. If weed were something they had found in the Amazon rainforest and had never been discovered before, and they took it to their labs and they started oh my God, it kills tumors and it helps appetite and it quells nausea and it helps anxiety and it helps rebuild brain neurons for dementia patients, and like all the stuff they'd find about cannabis, they would just be drooling at the potential third, fourth quarter profits that'd be coming up, and the patents they could get on this, and the medications they could create, and the new product lines. Oh, they would just be in heaven if they'd found this just last year in the rainforest. Problem for them is humanity's had cannabis for thousands of years, and the weed, and it grows everywhere, and it can even be grown indoors. That's the problem for them. They don't mind that it's a plant that heals all this stuff. They mind that they can't barcode it. Mark it up 4,000% and make a whole bunch of profit off it. And so when it comes to this idea, when we're talking about our healthcare system in America being tied to our employment, so many people I know have worked shitty jobs and stayed for terrible bosses for far too long because they had no choice, because the healthcare is tied to the work. I can't leave my job or else I die or I get really sick. And I know people say, oh, but you got Cobra. Yeah, have you looked at what that costs? That's not health care. That's really just the stick they use to beat you back into staying at the employer. Oh, yeah, you want to quit? Okay, well, here's what your health care will cost. But we'll give you health care. Wink. But this is what it'll cost. A lot of people can't deal with that. So when we introduce medical marijuana into the mix, where a person can start taking control of their own health care, where they used to be paying for this prescription medication that they just had to have for their pain or their anxiety, their nausea, or whatever it might be, and they discover medical cannabis works as well or better, well, now that's starting to free those chains, starting to break those chains, right? Starting to break the chain of healthcare tied to employment, that my health is tied to me slaving away for this boss man. So I get that guaranteed paycheck with the healthcare in it. Otherwise, I'm fed to the sharks out there and have to fend for myself. Wait a minute, I got this life raft of marijuana. I've got cannabis. I can treat myself. Maybe I don't need to stay with the boss. Maybe I can take care of myself. Maybe I can start that business I wanted to start. Maybe I can go to that vacation spot I always wanted to go to. Maybe things don't have to be the way they are. Folks, that's what this is all about. That's what all this prohibition and drug war and fighting against marijuana and everything, all the restrictions on medical patients, all of the CBD only laws, all the ridiculous, you can only grow 3 plants at home stuff. That's what it all boils down to, man. It boils down to how cannabis upsets the dominant paradigm. It upsets the capitalist paradigm. It upsets the healthcare paradigm. It upsets the idea of raping nature for continual unchecked growth. It upsets a whole lot of apple carts. That's why there's such these death throes from the prohibitionist dinosaurs as they sink into the tar pits, is they know that this radical change is coming, that this radical reformation in how we approach many aspects of our life is coming, and that cannabis is a huge part of it. Makes us think. Like George Carlin said, they want you dumb enough to run the machines, or they were smart enough to run the machines and dumb enough to accept your lot in life. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Stick around.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
This is Cannabis Facts from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org, supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. In 1937, the second most prescribed medicine, marijuana, was banned. It wasn't about marijuana. The paper, oil, and chemical industries lobbied to end hemp farming. No longer labor intensive, an acre of hemp produced more quality paper than 4 acres of trees. Plastics and fibers could be produced from a plant. Hemp can even produce 10 times the energy of today's ethanol. As marijuana prohibition ends, many states now allow farmers to again grow hemp. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to process America's hemp crop at hempinc.com.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for Shark Sessions from The Marijuana Show.
Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
I have a package here for Radical Rick. Is there a Radical Rick here? How about a Rick Russ? Any Rick Russ? Somebody named Freddie Barack has sent him a package. Anybody? What is that? Sounds like a skunk. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, folks, welcome back. And in this segment, I got to talk about the politics of the day. So we're going to go off the warpath a little bit. The segment where I talk about something other than the drug war. And it's because I'm an American. I love my country. I served my country. I was in the National Guard. I took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend this Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And, of course, our Constitution is under attack like never before with the election of Donald Trump and the installation of his administration. And the latest story out of the Washington Post just shows you, it used to be that we'd, make fun of the Democrats for being spineless. Spineless Democrats, they'd always retreat to Democrats' cave, right? But now it appears the Republican Party is the one lacking a spine, and the level to which they're stooping and the hypocrisy they're willing to entertain to continue to back Donald Trump just so they can keep their goals of getting tax cuts for the rich and, installing another anti-choice Supreme Court justice, has them clutching the mantle of the spineless party from the Democrats. And this story is amazing. It involves Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, and the then majority leader in the House, Kevin McCarthy. And there was this meeting that followed a meeting with the Prime Minister of Ukraine. And of course, Russia annexed Crimea. Ukraine is, pushing back against this creeping authoritarianism coming from Vladimir Putin and Russia. So there was a meeting where Paul Ryan and McCarthy had met with the Ukrainian prime minister. And then afterwards, Paul Ryan and McCarthy go back to speak with some other representatives, including Representatives Rogers, Scalise, and Patrick McHenry, among others, according to the Post. Paul Ryan starts talking about his meeting with the Ukrainian prime minister. Representative Rogers asks, how are things going in Ukraine? And so Paul Ryan says it's difficult. The Russians are firing shells into Ukrainian territory. And the prime minister described Russian tactics that include, quote, financing our populace, financing people in our governments to undo our governments. Ryan said Russia's goal was to turn Ukraine against itself. And so in the context of the discussion about Ukraine and how the government of Vladimir Putin was financing populist opposition leaders within Ukraine to try to divide the left, sound familiar, in the Ukraine, Paul Ryan says, maniacal. And guess who's the only one taking a strong stand up against it? We are, end quote. Rogers disagreed, quote, we're not, but we're not, end quote, she said. That's when McCarthy brought the conversation about Russian meddling around to the DNC hack, Donald Trump, and Representative Dana Rohrabacher. Now, this is where there's a little bit of a weed involvement because Dana Rohrabacher, of course, is a Republican from Orange County, California, who famously admitted he uses a medical cannabis salve product. I broke that story that appeared in the Washington Post, and I was the one that got the recording of it. Rohrabacher also has been a staunch defender of Vladimir Putin and Russia. So McCarthy says with a laugh, quote, I guarantee you that's what it is. The Russians hacked the DNC and got the opposition research that they had on Trump, end quote. And then here's the quote that is rocking the political world right now. The Republican majority leader, Kevin McCarthy says, quote, There's two people I think Putin pays, Rohrabacher and Trump, end quote. Then there's some laughter. And then McCarthy adds, quote, swear to God, end quote. And Paul Ryan says, this is an off the record, end quote. Then Ryan adds, quote, no leaks, all right? This is how we know we're a real family here, end quote. Representative Scalise said, that's how you know that we're tight. And Paul Ryan added, quote, what's said in the family stays in the family, end quote. So remember me yesterday talking about how Trump's administration and the GOP were starting to act like the mob? Jeez. And then the Washington Post prints this, that there's this conversation. They say, oh, this is all off the record. We think Trump is in the pocket of Vladimir Putin and maybe Dana Rohrabacher. Swear to God, nobody leak this. Don't leak this. This is how we're a family. Code of Omerta, right? Code of the family. We have been taken over. This country and the Republican Party is basically no more than a organized crime family at this point. They're even using the terminology. So, as if this story wasn't bombshell enough, this happened a year ago. This was like during the campaign a year ago that leaders in the House were speculating that Donald Trump was on Russia's payroll. A year ago. And they did manage to keep this quiet. They did quite well keeping it in the family because we haven't heard about this for a year. So they were confronted about this. Paul Ryan was. His spokespeople were confronted about this, saying that they had reports that there was this quote from Kevin McCarthy saying that Trump might be under Vladimir Putin's payroll. Matt Sparks, a spokesman for McCarthy, said, quote, the idea that McCarthy would assert this is absurd and false. And Brendan Buck, a spokesman for Paul Ryan, said, quote, that never happened, end quote. And then the Washington Post said, well, okay, but we've got a recording and we're going to put that in the story. Suddenly, the story changed. You have a record. There's a tape. Oh my goodness. Well. Buck, speaking for the GOP House leadership, said, quote, this entire year-old exchange was clearly an attempt at humor. No one believed the majority leader was seriously asserting that Donald Trump or any of our members were being paid by the Russians. What's more, the speaker and leadership team have repeatedly spoken out against Russia's interference in our election, and the House continues to investigate that activity. End quote. And Sparks, the spokesperson for McCarthy, said, quote, this was a failed attempt at humor, end quote. Well, it's not very funny. You're getting your comedy lessons from Governor Huckabee? Failed attempt at humor. In the context of what was going on, after a discussion with the Ukrainian prime minister about how Russia is funding elections to their favor, the House leader, the House majority leader says, I think the ones on Putin's payroll are Trump and Rohrabacher. And then when laughed at, follows that up with a serious swear to God. A failed attempt at humor. It's just a 23 Republican gap in the House, folks. The lead of the Republicans is 23. If you got 23 Republicans that could be convinced that the United States is more important than their own damn party, 23 Republicans is all it would take, as long as all the Democrats were all together. That's a big if. All the Democrats plus 23 Republicans is what it would take to begin articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. And there are plenty of articles for impeachment. Plenty of pieces of evidence. The most recent of which is this Trump bragging about intelligence sources in the Oval Office with the Russian ambassador, who is the guy that is at the center of all this Russia stuff that got Michael Flynn having to resign and the connections with all Paul Manafort and all the rest of this. The guy. And you ban the American press from being in there, but the Russian press is in there. And the fun development that happened today is now Vladimir Putin is trolling Donald Trump. When Trump was saying, "Oh, well, that's not the way that meeting went down," etc., with the Russian guys, Putin now is saying, "Hey, I will provide transcript. We have transcript. We will provide transcript." It's just masterful what's going on, at least if you look at it from the evil genius perspective. what Vladimir Putin has been able to do in our American politics is far better, far easier than having to actually, muster up troops and invade and take everything by force. Far easier to just use money and our own corruption against us. And so far it's working. And I just hope that the people begin to recognize what has happened in this country, that we are the frog in the pot, but the water's getting hot real quick these days. I still believe that if enough pressure is brought to bear and enough Republicans in risky districts, in close districts, begin to feel they're going to lose in 2018, that the House could return to being controlled by Democrats, and especially with just a 2-senator majority in the Senate, if the Republicans begin to believe that there's some Senate seats they could lose, if they begin to look at the possibility of Donald Trump being all alone against a Democratic Congress, I believe that the Republicans would bring articles of impeachment just to save their own sorry asses. And they'd have to do it in enough time so that the whole stink of the impeachment process doesn't hover over the Republican Party throughout the election season. And that election season increasingly begins earlier and earlier. We're talking, February 2018, January 2018, they're going to start running for their House elections. So it's May of 2017 right now. And impeachment articles and all the trial and all that stuff takes some time. Who knows? If this starts to get even worse than it is now, and it's pretty bad by my estimation, worst I've ever seen in my lifetime following presidential politics, we could actually see an impeachment happen just for the Republicans to save their own ass. And they'd have to do it quick enough so that the impeachment serves them well, that they'd look like the ones who did put their country above their party, that they're the ones that rode to the rescue. Democrats, I can see this happening, actually. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll wrap things up with some lightning round news on marijuana reform in the United States. Stick around.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association and the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit MJBA.net for more details.
It's time for Cannabis Facts about teen drug use from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A recent survey by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control indicates that in states that have legalized medical marijuana, the rate of marijuana consumption among high school students has not increased. In fact, in legal states like Colorado, teen use has actually decreased significantly. It's simply no longer a big deal for teenagers in legal states. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the UK Cannabis Chronicle from the UK Cannabis Social Clubs. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Most of us pirates, we go on vacation to North Dakota, you know, because they've got a town called Argusville. Arr. What are you smoking there, boy?
It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We are just closing up shop here, 54 after the hour, and time for our MarijuanaMoment.net lightning round. You can get all the latest news on the MarijuanaMoment.net newsletter. Check it out at MarijuanaMoment.net. It's absolutely free. It comes to your inbox every morning, and it's got all the news you can use to help end adult marijuana prohibition. Let's go. We start in the state of Washington, where the governor there, Jay Inslee, signed a bill to remove barriers to seed and clone sales and create an organic certification program, among other changes. In California, the Assembly voted 78-0 to approve a bill to ban marijuana edibles that could appeal to children. All right, this is the one I was talking about earlier. 78-0. Nobody could oppose this thing, right? Who wants to be on the side of, I'm pro kids eating marijuana edibles? Like, that's never going to get opposed. But again, it's just going to come up with stupid regulation that restricts the choice for us adults for something that kids wouldn't even be able to get to because it's in a store that's behind walls you have to show ID to get to. The only way kids get a hold of these gummies is through inattentive and irresponsible parents. Do something about inattentive and irresponsible parents, not the product that they're inattentive and irresponsible about. You ban the marijuana gummies. You haven't cured the irresponsible, inattentive parent who might leave something else out for their kids to get into. Let's deal with the problem, not the symptom. Let's move on. The Delaware State Senate failed to advance a bill to expand the state's medical cannabis program, including by adding new qualifying conditions. That is a shame to hear. The qualifying conditions in question here in the Delaware bill for expanding medical marijuana failed to win passage after 10 lawmakers in the 21-member chamber abstained from voting. Couldn't be bothered to vote on this. They were going to add debilitating anxiety as a qualifying condition, which includes generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and social anxiety. They also said that this could provide help to people with PTSD as well. 10 Delaware senators couldn't be bothered to offer an opinion on such a thing. Oh, it did not pass. In Florida, regulators there have ordered a dispensary to stop selling whole plant marijuana. Yes, this is according to a story in the Associated Press. Florida's Department of Health ordered a Quincy-based dispensary to quit selling a medical cannabis product that could potentially be broken down and made into pot that could be smoked. The company is called Trulieve, and they sell whole flower cannabis meant for vaping at 5 retail dispensaries and through home delivery. Department of Health authorized them to sell sealed vaporizer cups containing marijuana, but said that the cups can be removed with minimal effort. The caps can be removed with minimal effort and cannot be reattached. For tobacco use only, I have read the terms and conditions. Come on, man. You sell someone a cup of weed and you say, oh, it's like a Keurig cup, right? You can only vaporize it. Don't open that cup and then smoke it. So this is, once again, I talked about this on a previous show, how regulators want to pretend they're doctors. They think they know what's best, and no, we can't have anybody smoking the weed. So they've been banned from doing so, and I'm sure there's got to be a legal battle over this because I believe the Florida law allows for whole plant access. It just says you can't smoke it. Now, obviously, give people whole plant access, they're going to smoke it. But under the law, if they're not smoking it, having that whole plant is perfectly legal. So why couldn't it be legal to sell someone that whole plant? All right, let's move on. The Rhode Island House Judiciary Committee approved a bill to create a marijuana legalization study commission. The House Speaker says he supports this approach instead of ending prohibition this session. Judges just barely give that an approval. There was some doubt. They weren't quite sure. I don't know what we need to study. What is it we need to study now? This is always the fallback for these guys. Oh, well, we need more research. Need more study, need more research. We've only got 2 states that have been doing it for 5 years and 3 other states that have been doing it for 2 years, 1 year. We don't have enough information yet. We've only got 30 states that have medical marijuana. We've only got some of them states have had medical for 2 decades. We just don't know enough yet. We got to do some more study. That's all the time we got, folks.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and SoundCloud. And follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
For everyone here at Delta 9 Studios, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
You plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.